Hey, thank you for joining me into this look into dataset linking. We're going to explore a feature by creating an inventory look-ahead report that links to datasets. First off, what is dataset linking? It is a new feature available to all NetSuite accounts starting in release 2022.1. I am recording this prior to this release, and anything that I show you here may have changed in the intervening time, so keep that in mind. Why do you need this feature? Well, it's useful when you have two different sources of data that need to be combined or shown side by side in a single view in NetSuite. If you have been doing this in the past through exporting Excel spreadsheets from saved searches and doing VLOOKUPs and that sort of thing to create the pivot tables you want, this feature can save you a lot of time. The example that we're going to go through today is going to be, I think, a pretty common example of where sales reps need to know when a given quantity of goods will be available. They're being posed this question from their customers and they need to be able to give them an answer. The answer is going to depend on the current available inventory, plus walking forward week over week what I expect to come in on purchase orders until I reach the sum of 100 pieces. Where is this information from? Well, the first part of that, the available quantity, that's at the item data level. This data contains all the items, not just those with inventory or those with purchase orders scheduled. So tapping into this data source gives us access to all the SKUs, whereas if we only had purchase orders to try to link from, we would definitely miss some items that did not appear on any purchase orders that were filtered by our data set. And the second data set, of course, is purchase data, and that gives us our time-based quantities for when we can expect each PO line to be received, their expected receipt date. As we plan our report, we should keep a couple of things in mind. Only two, not more than two, data sets can be linked in a single workbook. In this release, linked data sets can only be combined in a pivot table. You can't use this data in or linked data sets in a table view just yet. It is on the roadmap, but not in this release. Each row and column in our pivot table has to exist as a column in both data sets. That also goes for our calculated values, which we'll see as we get further into this. The data type of each column must match. Very important. You won't be able to link the data sets column to column unless those columns have the matching data type. So we'll keep that in mind. In our use case, what do we want to show? Well, we want to show each item as a row in our table, and we want to see columns for the current available. That's going to be across all locations, the current on order across all dates and all locations, and then a column for every Friday for the next 12 weeks with how much we expect to have by that date. For these rows, each item, both data sets have the item already, so that's not a problem. The available current, this is going to have to be sourced exclusively from the item data set. The on order, all dates, this could come from either data set, but not both. And for reasons I'll get into when we go a little further in, I'll show you why I would source this from the item table. And then, of course, we need a column for every Friday for the next 12 weeks with how much we expect to have by that date. This is going to have to be a combination of the transaction data set, the PO data set, plus the item data set. Remember, because that item data set knows what we have today, and the transaction data set knows what we're going to have in the coming weeks. This is what we're shooting for. This is the target. We want to see these columns presented to the user, total on order, the total available today, and then one column for every week going into the future. Today is the 20th as I record this, so the next Friday will be the 24th, and Friday after that will be the 4th, the 11th, and the 18th, and you get the idea. We're going to have more columns than I'm presenting here. The items, of course, are going to be displayed each as a row, and then as time marches across this page, coming from available today, it's only going to increase. Purchase orders can't use up inventory, so they're only going to add to our projected total. We have 300 on order, and that's a combined total of all that you see here. Available today is 100 for item 1, and you can see that on or before 2/24, we're going to get 50 pieces from somewhere. And then again, on or before March 4th, we're going to get another 50 pieces, bringing us up to 200. And then here on or before March 11th, we'll get another 100 pieces, bringing us to 300. And then here, by the following Friday, we'll have our 400 because we'll have received another 100 pieces of item 1. And we see the same sort of thing going across the page. Item number 3 here, we have nothing on order. So all we will ever have is what's available today. There are no POs on this one. Item 2, there's nothing available today. And we're going to get some on the 24th, some on or before the 4th, and then some again on or before the 18th. And item 4, we have 1 available today. We're going to get pretty much 1 a week up through the 18th. So now that we know what we're up against, let's go ahead and start our first data set. This is going to be an item data set, and we have 1 filter in place. Demo item is true. And we will start by adding the quantity on order. This is the easiest of the columns we're going to have to make. And we find that data under the locations, join. And I'm going to actually pull in the location so we can get a better view of what we're up against here. As soon as I do this, you start seeing some duplicate rows, right? You've got location 1 and location 2, which both have different inventory values. I'm going to take quantity on order and put it right here as a column. And I'm going to rename this just on order. Next, I am going to pull in quantity available. Now, I could just pull in this column. It's not going to quite give me what I want. When this eventually goes to a pivot table, it's going to give me a sum of all the quantity available. And what I really want is, I want a positive number for every location that has quantity available. But if a location has a back order, I'd rather expose that as a negative number so that I can get an overall across all locations balance of what my available minus back order is. And that's really a true representation of my company-wide availability for this item. So I'm going to do that by creating a new formula. I'm just going to call this available today. And that's going to be in the locations table. And that's quantity available. And also quantity back ordered, but I need to make this into a case statement. So I'm going to say case when location quantity available greater than 0, then show this. And case when location quantity back ordered is greater than 0, and show 1 times this. It's going to be a float because all quantities in NetSuite are always floats. Let's validate this. I have an extra case in there. That's not going to work. Okay, validate this. And I need to put an end in my case statement. Okay, now I've got a great formula to drop in right here. Okay, now I have an available today figure, I have an on order figure, and now I need to actually carry that available today forward into the future. So I'm going to take this entire case statement, I'm going to copy it, and make a new formula, and I'm going to name it the date, the first Friday that I care about, which is going to be 2/25/2022. This needs to be a float. That'll go right there. And I'm going to do the exact same thing 11 more times for the next 11 weeks in the sequence. And now we've got a number of columns across this page here, each with the exact same formula and the exact same value. That gives us the balance of what is available right now. That's our today snapshot. It's just extended across all the weeks that we need for our report. Okay, that was the easier of the two data sets to set up. Now we're in the PO data set, and with With this data set, we first need to get a dummy available today value and a dummy on order value. Remember that this available today value, we want this to come 100% from the item table. It's not a combination of the two data sets. It's going to be coming from here, but we have to at least make it available here so that it can be added to, the zero can be added to the value from the item table when we go to a pivot. Let's validate that, save it, bring this in as a column. I'm going to do the same for the on order. And the reason I don't want to use this on order from the purchase order data, it would seem like I could, but there may come a time when I want to constrain the purchase orders being sourced in this data set by some other filter. And that would mean that whatever sum I came up with here wouldn't match what's in the system in NetSuite for the full on order. So just feel better with it coming from the item record. It could be that the use case will change my mind later. But for now, let's look at what the on order value is for the item as a whole in NetSuite. And not just in this subset of POs that I'm pulling in with these filters. So those out of the way, now we need to look at our date-based filters. Here, we're going to do the same thing we did in the item, except we're actually going to have some more involved logic in that case statement. First Friday is 2/25/2022 from today. And this is the case statement that I'm going to use. I'm using the NVL function in order to default this in case some human has forgot to put an expected receipt date on a PO. We're going to default it, fall back to roughly 1,000 years in the future. So it won't match our condition here because it has to be less than or equal to this date, 2/25/2022. And if it is, then we're going to express the quantity in this column. And if it's not less than or equal to that date, if it's not before that date, we're going to express a 0 in that column. This is going to be a float data type, validate it, it checks out, save it, drag it onto our data set. Beautiful. Now I'm going to do this 11 more times. And I'm going to use this exact same formula with a little bit of a nudge every time. I'm actually going to change this date to be whatever the column is, okay? The next Friday after the 25th, March 4th. So 3/4/2022. I'm going to paste this into here, and I'm actually going to change this to 3/4 to match what's up here. Make sure I go to float, validate, save it, drag it. And now we have all of our dates expressed across the report all the way through Friday, the 13th of May. And as you take a look at this data, you'll see that there's one line on this report for every PO line out there. And as soon as this line here represents a PO with expected ship date that's on or before 2/25, and it never goes false. Like it never goes below 10. It's going to stay 10 the whole way across the page. The next receipt for this item is going to be on or before 3/4, but after 2/25, we've got somewhere in there, there's a purchase order line with 10 more. So now we have a total of 20 for this item. And when this goes to a pivot table and we're summarizing this by item, think of this as a save sort. These get grouped and that gets summed. So this becomes 10, and this becomes 20, and this becomes 30, but we're also going to combine this with the item tables data in this same column. So this will become 10 plus whatever our current snapshot is. This was 20 plus our current snapshot, 30 plus our current snapshot, et cetera. And that's going to give us a rolling total of what we can expect by that date, all the way up to the end of our time period here. So I'm going to save this PO data set. And now I have an item data set over here. Looks a lot like that, same columns. I've got some extra columns here that I'm not going to map through and use in the final workbook, namely the location here. It doesn't need to really go into the final location, but it harms nothing to leave it. So I'm going to just leave it here so I can see, by location, I can validate my data. I could create a new workbook from this data set, or I could create a new workbook from this data set. It doesn't matter which. I'm just going to choose the PO. Okay. Once this data set is created, I am going to connect a second data set with this button here. Okay, my item data set. Beautiful. And now I'm going to link these data sets together. Create data set link. And here is where our magic happens. Granted, it's going to be pretty tedious magic, but we're going to grab one field at a time and link them across in this common keys column. It's going to be pretty straightforward because we've named our columns in such a way that they're very easy to match up. I'm just going to take them straight down the line, 311 to 311, and the order here doesn't matter. NetSuite's going to mess it up for me anyway. I'd love for these to be in chronological order, but that's what we'll have to do at the workbook later when we put this together. For now, these line up alphabetically, so we'll just drag them in one by one. Okay, now all of our common keys are mapped over. I'm going to click the Link Datasets button. And that part is done. Now I have all these data sets with a little chain icon next to them, that they're linked together. I can use them in this pivot table. Click Pivot, and my rows are going to be my items. And our calculated measures, we're just going to start with the on order value and available today. Now I'm going to start dragging these in chronological order. And here we are with our finished data set. It's going to close up this piece of it so we can see this a little bit better. And we've got item 1, which you recall had a lot of orders against it. Only 4 available today, and that's the expression of having 10 available in one location and 6 back order in another location. Gives me a balance of 4 company-wide available. Add to that, we have 10 coming week over week for the next few weeks of this item until we reach 104 on 429, and I believe that's the last order for that. We can see that our totals only get larger as we go forward in time. We're just accumulating more and more inventory. So if our sales rep asks, when can I have 100 pieces of a given item, we'd look at this item right here, and the answer would be 429, because that's the first time this reaches 100 pieces. Last step, of course, is to rename our workbook. And there you have it. Here's our pivot table that has real-time inventory reporting. Thanks again for joining me for this dataset linking presentation. If you need any help putting together your own use cases for dataset linking or any other NetSuite problems, reach out to us. Thank you.